budget battle. Democrats grill members of President Donald Trump's cabinet one day after his funding priorities for 2020 are released. We're on Capitol Hill. Cardinal in court. Why tomorrow is an important day in the case against the highest-ranking Catholic cleric convicted of sex abuse. Tragedy in the air. Details emerge about some of the Catholic victims of Sunday's Ethiopian Airlines crash. And a ray of hope. How a Catholic community is trying to bring peace to the Central African Republic. On EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, March 12th, 2019. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you for joining us for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Democrats grill members of President Donald Trump's cabinet who are on Capitol Hill to defend the president's 2020 budget requests. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi digs into today's heated hearings over how to best spend American tax dollars. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Lauren. The Trump administration says they're devoting unprecedented amounts to school choice. People could get tax credits by donating to scholarship funds. Those, in turn, would help kids go to Catholic or other private schools. Now, this 2020 budget would cut 5% from non-defense spending while still adding $1.1 trillion to the deficit.
This budget attacks the most vulnerable in this nation.
Democrats hammer the Trump administration for boosting defense spending while making other cuts.
So why in the world are you asking for $750 billion for defense, in contrast to the enormity of the amount of billions of dollars that you're cutting from education, environment, Medicaid, Medicare?
The president's budget would drop $2 trillion from healthcare spending, including on medical research.
No agency can spend well when they don't live in a resource-constrained world.
The acting budget director defends cutting 10% from the Department of Education. He says some programs just don't work.
We believe this budget fully funds what is necessary to continue to educate our children. We have $50 billion.
So that we can continue falling behind South Korea, China, other competitors around the world in our education standards. Is that what you would like to continue?
One of the reasons why we are putting forward a different type of proposal. We have $50 billion in school choice tax credits that can be done at both the public level or at the private level. It's a paradigm shift that we think is important.
The 2020 budget would double the D.C. Opportunity Scholarship, which helps poor D.C. kids go to Catholic and other private schools.
Our view is that parents and families, states and localities can often do a better job.
Congress does hold the power of the purse.
This administration's budget is dead on arrival in the House.
This year's budget doesn't include last year's language to stop certain abortion providers from receiving federal funds. The appendix, which will come out later, includes normal pro-life riders like banning funds from going to most abortions. Now, the president promised to veto any spending bill that gets rid of these pro-life protections. Lauren?
Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi. Thank you, Jason. Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi says she has no plans to pursue the impeachment of President Donald Trump, saying it's just not worth it. In an interview yesterday with the Washington Post, the California Democrat said it is also in part because it would further divide the country, and some Democrats hoped that she would begin proceedings. A new picture of President Trump meeting the Boy Scouts at the White House today shows the changing face of the 109-year-old organization. We find correspondent Mark Irons at the White House. Tell us what happened. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Lauren. Scouts were at the White House today. The group is now permitting girls for membership after first accepting biological girls who identify as boys a couple years ago. Now, we haven't heard what President Trump thinks of the Scouts' new policies, but he has proposed banning transgender people from military ranks.
The Boy Scouts joined President Trump in the Oval Office today to provide their report to the nation, part of a tradition carried on for more than a century. Today, the face of the Scouts is changing. Over the past 2 years, the group has approved new policies allowing girls and biological girls who identify as boys into their ranks. A statement from their website says, by welcoming both girls and boys into the program, even more youth will have access to the character development and values-based leadership that Scouting promises. But the Christian-based Trail Life USA formed as an alternative to the Scouts, and the chairman of Trail Life earlier told us the needs of transgender youth should be handled differently.
They need concern, they need help, they need counseling. They don't need to be encouraged and promoted and facilitated in this kind of a thought which is really delusional.
President Trump is seen smiling with the Boy Scouts today, but he has been vocal about barring transgender individuals from organizations before. In 2017, a tweet from President Trump demanded a ban on transgender individuals to serve in any capacity in the U.S. military. He cited the cost of sex change operations at the military's expense. Earlier this year, the Supreme Court allowed the military to enforce the transgender ban, while lower court challenges play out.
The president's relationship with the Boy Scouts of America did take a hit a couple years ago when he gave a speech at their annual jamboree, and it turned very political. The top executive of the Boy Scouts had to issue an apology to those who were offended by the president's political rhetoric. Lauren.
White House correspondent Mark Irons. Thank you, Mark. After an investigation, church officials placed restrictions on 2 bishops who once led dioceses in Maryland and West Virginia. Both face claims of sexual harassment. Bishop Michael Bransfield is the former leader of the Diocese of Wheeling-Charleston in West Virginia. He denies ever abusing anyone. The final decision rests on a review by the Holy See. Bishop Gordon Bennett is a former Baltimore auxiliary bishop who was later appointed bishop in Jamaica. The future of his priestly ministry is up to his Jesuit superiors. The Archdiocese of Boston will implement a third-party system for reporting allegations of clergy sexual abuse against bishops. Cardinal Sean O'Malley made the announcement late last week and says the system will be in place very soon. Britain, France, and Germany are adding their names to the list of countries grounding Boeing 737 from taking to the sky. It's the same type of plane that crashed Sunday in Ethiopia, killing everyone on board. And we're learning more about those who died, including a number of Catholics. Correspondent Wyatt Goolsby reports from the State Department. Good evening, Wyatt.
Good evening, Lauren. Family members of those victims are demanding to know exactly what happened to the jetliner, which crashed just 6 minutes after takeoff. Many flyers are now skeptical about boarding a Boeing 737 MAX 8, but the United States has yet to ground those planes. The FAA says it's hoping to learn more as part of Ethiopia's ongoing investigation.
American aviation and Israeli forensic experts are on site at the crash scene of the Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302, trying to figure out why the plane crashed. The area is now part of a global investigation. The jetliner went down Sunday, just minutes after taking off from Ethiopia's capital. It's a regular flight bringing missionaries, aid workers, and diplomats to Kenya's capital. All 157 people on board were killed. This man says he saw the plane coming down. It rotated 2 times in the air and had smoke coming from the back. Then it hit the ground and exploded. Among the rubble, investigators are finding personal items, including pictures of loved ones. Ethiopian pilots and flight crew offered prayers during a vigil for the staff members who died. In Northern California, Catholics are also mourning the loss of 2 brothers. Melvin and Bennett Riffle attended St. Joseph's Catholic School in Redding, California. Their family says they appreciate the outpouring of love and prayers. In addition, 2 Kenyan natives, a sister and a priest, were on board. Both served as Catholic missionaries. Catholic Relief Services lost 4 staff members who worked to provide food to the starving. And finally, a Georgetown law student who served as an on-campus chaplain. The Federal Aviation Administration now says it will order Boeing to modify its 737 MAX 8 jets. The FAA notes a similar crash in Indonesia just 5 months ago. Aviation experts say there are no signs terrorism is to blame.
It's never one thing. It's always a multiple combination of factors that lead to a catastrophic accident like this. And so that is what we can expect. Multiple factors.
Some lawmakers are urging the FAA to go the same way as European countries are and ground the Boeing 737 MAX 8 just as a precaution. Several airlines like American and Southwest, who use the same type of plane regularly, say they are confident with their equipment and their staff, which have not reported the same kind of problem. Lauren.
Correspondent Wyatt Goolsbee reporting from the State Department. Thank you, Wyatt. The possible sainthood cause for Father Jacques Hamel wrapped up the beatification phase today after hearing from 66 witnesses, including 5 eyewitnesses. Hamel was killed by ISIS terrorists in 2016 while celebrating Mass in France. After his death, Pope Francis said Hamel gave his life in the same sacrifice of Jesus and called the priest a martyr. The case now heads to Rome. The most senior Catholic to be convicted of child sex abuse, will be sentenced tomorrow in Australia. Cardinal George Pell is the former Vatican treasurer. He faces 5 decades in prison. In an unusual move, the sentencing will be broadcast on live television in Australia. The 77-year-old denies the claims and says he will appeal his conviction. Central African Republic has experienced instability since independence from France in 1960. But since 2013, the country has seen deadly interreligious fighting. It started when Muslim rebels seized power in the capital and Christian militias fought back. Thousands have been killed. Hundreds of thousands have been displaced. But earlier this month, the capital saw a ray of hope. The Holy Father's point man for charity traveled to Bangui on March 2nd for the inauguration of a new medical center for malnourished children. Pope Francis sponsored the clinic after his visit to the country in 2015. Mauro Garofalo is the International Relations Officer of the community of Sant'Egidio. It's a Catholic community founded in 1968 focused on prayer, peace, and the poor. And he joins us from Rome. Mauro, welcome to the program.
Welcome. Good morning, Lauren.
Your group has been working in the Central African Republic since 2003. You spent more than a decade trying to work on dialogue. Can you set the scene for us in where you are?
We are now in a very peculiar moment of the history of the Republic because we just struck a deal on the 6th of February, a deal for peace and reconciliation. So we are now all waiting for the implementation of the agreement. We were in Khartoum for 16 days of hard negotiation. So the atmosphere is full of hope, but also we are waiting for peace to come back definitely on Central African Republic.
Well, this agreement was signed by the government and 14 rebel groups, but I understand that peace agreements have been signed in other years and then ignored. Will this one work?
Hopefully yes, because there is a broader support by the international community, by neighboring countries. And above all, we all know that this may be the last chance for Central African Republic. So we all need to work in the implementation of this agreement. It is a last chance, but hopefully it will work.
Now, in 2015, the Pope visited the Central African Republic. He visited with Pope Francis just last week, I believe it was, at the Vatican, and acknowledged the positive role that the Catholic Church has played in the country, specifically because the Pope opened a Catholic pediatric hospital. Tell me about that and how it's affected your work.
The role of the Catholic Church is essential in Central African Republic. And the visit of the Pope Francis is still remembered as a great moment of history because it changed a lot of things, and especially when it comes to dialogue and reconciliation. And the support of the Pope to Central African Republic never faded away. He always receiving the president here in Rome, and this opening of the pediatric hospital in Bangui is also a very good thing because the situation of healthcare in Central African Republic is awful. So now we have a pediatric hospital of high level. There are many other Catholic institutions and ONG that are working to heal, to treat in Central African Republic, including ourselves with the program to treat HIV there for free.
Mauro, if the Catholic Church wasn't involved in the Central African Republic, what would it be like?
It would be far worse than it is now. The efforts of the Catholic Church at all levels Local church, but also ONG and institution is extremely important. It's essential for the Central African Republic at all levels, for the assistance to the poor people, for humanitarian help, but also for dialogue and reconciliation. It is much needed.
Mauro Garofalo of the community of Sant'Egidio, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Lauren. Goodbye.
Coming up, a lawmaker from Illinois tells us how she's trying to end the rising death rate for women giving birth. An Illinois congresswoman says the nation's rising maternal mortality rate has become a crisis, and she's calling for action. An estimated 700 women in the United States die each year from pregnancy-related causes, and African American women are 3 to 4 times more likely to die from pregnancy-related causes than non-Hispanic white women. Joining me now, Representative Robin Kelly, Democrat from Illinois and chairwoman of the Congressional Black Caucus Health Brain Trust. Congresswoman Kelly, welcome to our broadcast.
Thanks for having me.
You've reintroduced the Mothers and Offspring Mortality and Morbidity Awareness Act, or much easier to say, the MAMA Act, to address this problem. Why is this happening in the U.S., and why is it more difficult for African American women?
Well, that's why we're introducing the legislation, because we really don't know all the answers, and we're hoping that this legislation will help us figure out what's going on and what are the solutions to the problem. And it cuts across actually all socioeconomic levels, characteristic races, but it does happen more, 3 to 4 times more with African American women. And in my home state of Illinois, it's actually 6 times more with African American women. And it could be just the regular things that happen, the healthcare disparities, the lack of access, the healthcare issues that are associated more with African Americans, like high blood pressure.
What has drawn you to fighting this battle? I'm assuming it's because of your constituents or anything else?
Well, as you said, I'm the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus Health Brain Trust, and I'm also one of the co-founders and co-chairs of the Caucus on Black Women and Girls. I am a woman, I am a mother, and I want other people who want to be moms to be able to be moms.
What factors play a role? You've mentioned it. What is really the main factor? Is it just lack of access? Because I know that's one of your goals, to improve access to what you call culturally competent care training. What is that? That's bias?
That's one of the prongs that to have culturally competent care in the continuum. There's been a lot of research that people do better when there are people that look like them that are treating them. So helping to have culturally competent doctors would be, we believe, would be helpful, but it's also data collecting, it's also review committees, that's all a part of it. It's also looking at best practices throughout the United States, like what states are doing well or better than other states, and what can we do to copy what they're doing.
Okay, you also, I find this fascinating, you also are advocating that you're going to extend or expand Medicaid coverage for all women from the current 2 months postpartum period to 1 year. What difference would an additional 10 months make for these women?
Well, according to the doctors that have been my resource, they feel that it would make a big difference, and there's a high percentage of women that something happened after the initial 2 months. So we feel the first year would cover nicely, just in case something does happen.
Congresswoman Robin Kelly, a Democrat from Illinois, thank you so much for joining us.
You're quite welcome.
Lawmakers in Arkansas approve a measure to ban most abortions after 18 weeks. The bill faces one last vote before heading to the desk of Governor Asa Hutchinson. The Republican supports the measure. And in Mississippi, the House of Representatives passes a heartbeat bill. That would ban most abortions once a baby's heartbeat is detected sometime after 6 weeks. The proposal now moves to the Senate. Mississippi is one of around a dozen states considering heartbeat bills. Up next, we hear about paid family leave and how it made its way into the president's 2020 budget. A teacher in Utah has apologized for making a 9-year-old Catholic student wash the Ash Wednesday cross off of his forehead. The woman was put on administrative leave. She says it was a misunderstanding and did not know the ashes were a religious symbol. The student's grandmother says her grandson told the teacher twice about its significance. Republican Senators Joni Ernst and Mike Lee today announced the Cradle Act, a plan to create a budget-neutral paid parental leave. If chosen, you would trade delayed Social Security payouts for time off as a new parent.
Anyone can choose whether or not to participate in the program. This doesn't compel anyone to take it. Secondly, those who are eligible to participate in the program, I think, are likely in many instances to want to take it.
Critics say the bill delays the start time of Social Security benefits at retirement. Parents choosing to opt in would select to take 1, 2, or 3 months of paid leave. And for each month taken, it would delay Social Security benefits by 2 months. Joining me now is Rachel Greszler, Research Fellow in Economics, Budget, and Entitlements at the Heritage Foundation. Welcome to our broadcast. What do you think about the Cradle Act? According to Ivanka Trump, she's called for this paid family leave, and she says it's an investment in the future of our workers, our families, and our country. So is it a viable solution?
There's a lot of support amongst both Republicans and Democrats on the Hill, and this is an interesting proposal, and I will credit them with finding a way that they can take a program, make it a federal program, and yet not put the cost on taxpayers. So that is unique.
Well, it is on taxpayers. It's just
it's keeping them on work. Yes, it's keeping it with. It's supposed to keep it with the worker. So if I take leave, then I will delay my retirement in the future. But the two big problems that I see with this bill is, first, it's using Social Security for something that it's not. And second, it's using Social Security, which is opening the door to a massive federal program in the future. I don't think
and it's also taking money away from Social Security, which then would affect the economy, I believe.
It is.
You know what? The most important thing to me, though, is the women and the fathers and this whole issue of being able to be with them. So I asked News Nightly social media followers to tell me about their challenges. Let's take a look. Melissa Font de Alvarez writes, the cost of childcare is unaffordable and out of reach for us. Jessica Stewart Baustian says, we have 2 children under 2 years old. I cannot afford to work because the cost of childcare would be my entire salary. So let's talk about the impact on the economy.
Well, the impact of childcare is huge, and this is something that affects women's decisions and men's as well as to whether or not to work. But paid family leave is not addressing that childcare. There are different ways to look at childcare, and a lot of that comes down to the regulations. There are excessive regulations that lead to the difference in childcare costs being 5-fold between lower cost states like Mississippi and higher cost areas like here in DC. And so are there ways that state policymakers can reduce those regulations so that it doesn't cost so much for childcare?
Right, we are talking about 2 different things. Paid family leave gives you the time with your child, but then childcare is for the entire time that you would like to work. President Trump's budget proposal includes family leave for all new parents, and it invests in childcare. So it does both. By providing a one-time mandatory investment of $1 billion, that encourages businesses to establish child care facilities for their employees. At my last employer, it was right there on site. Do you think we're going to see pushback from companies for this?
I don't think so. I mean, I think the best way to provide paid family leave is directly between an employee and an employer, and the 2 of them working together. When I think about what employees need, and having taken 6 paid family leaves myself,
6.
It's
Congratulations.
Thank you. You need a program that allows you to send an email or to quickly ask a boss, can I take off for this leave? A lot of the time, it's not actually just for parents, it's for other needs, but you need to have a quick response, and you need to have an interaction between an employee and employer. You don't need a one-size-government-fits-all program that just won't meet workers' needs.
It's interesting you say that, because Karen Notbush also wrote in and saying it's just not for parents, it's also for siblings and other people. So thank you for mentioning that. Her text is here. Workers should be allowed paid time off to care for parents and siblings. It comes down to a choice between keeping a job while watching loved ones deteriorate or caring for them and losing that job. Thank you so much, Rachel Greszler, research fellow in economics, budget, and entitlements at the Heritage Foundation. That does it for us, for all of us here at EWTN News Nightly. To all of you around the world, thank you for watching. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Let's keep in touch online. Follow me at Lauren Ashburn on Twitter and Lauren Ashburn EWTN on Facebook, and keep those childcare comments coming. Good night, and God bless you.